Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis Podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, member Florida Man shares his meteoric rise in his short career on Wall Street. Learn how he got over $150,000 in compensation as a first-year analyst and over $200,000 as a second year. In this episode, we follow his path from a large state school in Florida to a bulge bracket investment bank, all the way to a family-owned private equity fund, and finally, to his most recent landing spot, a traditional private equity buyout fund. Make sure you stay to the end to learn his best piece of advice and what ABR means. Enjoy. Florida Man, thanks for joining the Wall Street Oasis Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Patrick.
So it'd be great if you could just give a quick summary.
So I'll start kind of high level on my background. So I'm from Florida, given the name Florida Man, from the rural part of the state. Went to a state school, Division I college to play baseball, actually. Was recruited on there, played for a year and a half, and then got cut because I learned I wasn't athletic enough at the end of the day. Started focusing more on my major, which was finance. Went straight from that school to kind of a mid-tier bulge bracket bank, I'll say. And then from there to a family office in their private equity arm. And then recently left to join a generalist middle market fund, all within New York City.
Nice. And so let's start back all the way in Florida at your state school. So did you, when you got recruited for baseball, tell me about that. Were you thinking like, hey, I'm going to go to the majors? Like, I know, because as a high school kid, you know, you're probably, to be recruited or to come in at D1, you must have been pretty good.
Yeah. So, you know, baseball is a weird thing. It's like, it's one of the few college sports where if you play at a college team, you're the B grade player because all the A grade players get drafted.
Right.
So you learn pretty early on if you're not getting recruited to start at the best schools, you're probably not going to go pro.
Right.
And so even, you know, the seventh hitter at Texas is probably not going to go pro. And they have to know that really early on. So baseball can be a very humbling sport, not just from that perspective, but from the fact that you fail 70% of the time as an offensive player. So I never really thought I was going to go pro. I played on a really competitive travel ball team growing up.
Yeah.
And then at a really competitive high school, and we traveled around the country and played some of the, you know, best teams from all around, you know, California, Nevada, Texas.
So you knew you were good, but you knew pro was probably unlikely.
I had seen, I'll say it like this, I had seen people like Bryce Harper at, you know, like showcases that we would compete against, and I just said, like, there's a different level of skill that puts certain people in a different category. So I knew my place early on.
It's like me with soccer, man. Same thing.
Yeah. Right.
So cool. So you kind of went through the program there, and then so pretty early on you knew, hey, sports aren't going to be my ticket. Were you a good student?
I was. So I basically declared finance as a major very early on, maybe like sophomore year in college. Both my parents are accountants, and I knew I wanted to do something technical, but I knew I didn't want to be an accountant. So I chose finance because I thought it brought some social aspect of kind of business along with the technical aspect.
Sure.
And then there was a program at the school I went to that I ended up joining as a result of focusing on that major. So I was like a TA. I was involved in like the student-run hedge fund, which a lot of these state schools and a lot of private schools have as well.
Yep.
So really immersed myself in the major from an early point and went from there.
So was it well known, like banking was like, investment banking was at the top kind of destination for people coming out of your school? I mean, given it's a state school, I'm sure it has some decent alum kind of network on there. Can you talk to me a little bit about, were you able to land a junior summer internship, a sophomore internship? How did you kind of progress through your college career to kind of set yourself up?
Yeah, sure. So my sophomore year, This is kind of a tip. I did pretty much the most typical route. I did a,
Sure.
semi-high finance internship. So I interned at a wealth management office in Florida, at an office where the head manager ran a semi-active hedge fund, and so kind of learned a bit about capital markets from that perspective, and capital and the difference in debt and equity and that kind of thing. And then from there, did a junior year internship in New York City in banking, and then joined the same bank after that. And I would say the pipeline from that school is strong. It's a top 10 public school kind of a thing.
Yep.
And if you're in this certain program at that school and you're immersed in your major, I find that the placement's pretty attractive, and the alumni group, even though it's a giant school, is pretty supportive, given, especially in New York, given there's not that many alumni who come to New York and then take part in banking. But it's kind of a growing reputation from that school, and I try to help out on the back end as well. So
so tell me a little bit about that. So coming into your, you had the typical private wealth management summer internship in your sophomore year, like you said. You're coming into your junior year. Were there any banks coming onto campus, and how did you kind of set yourself up for that? You obviously had like a finance-oriented resume. You were doing like the whole hedge fund thing. You were, showing leadership on campus. But what did you do? Were you talking to people early on? Was it just people? Was it the coffee chats and the whatever you call it, when they come on campus? Is that what you did?
Yeah. So I think it was kind of interesting. So the school I went to, they basically had this program that took the top, 30 finance majors, made them take the GMAT, and then put them in this program. And that program basically was boot camp is a funny word, but it was like a quick intro into what it would take to get an IB internship in New York from a non-target school. And so they did mock interviews and resume reviews, and they helped you get a sophomore year internship, and they introduced you to alumni. We actually flew up to New York, which was my first time in New York. And, we toured banks with alumni. And so we got a feel for what it was. But I would say going into sophomore year, and maybe even after sophomore year, I didn't know what investment banking was. I wasn't from like a large metropolitan area. I was from a very rural area. And so investment banking, I remember hearing the term the first time as like a sophomore and having no idea what that meant. And slowly progressing and learning it through one part being a good student and falling into this program, and secondly from reaching out to a ton of alumni and being outgoing and going to grab a drink or coffee with as many people as you could.
But being so
was
far
never
away,
something I struggled with, but I would definitely encourage others to do the same.
But like being so far away, was it the trips to New York that were key, or was it the fact that they came down to campus?
So some banks came down, some didn't. There were, out of the New York banks, there was probably 4 that made that school a target school, and so it would take, 2 to 5 kids from the university as a whole, but almost all of them were from that 30-person program.
Got it.
And then there were regional banks, so like think SunTrust, Wells Fargo, Stephens, Raymond James, those kind of banks that would also target the same program kids. So there was enough on campus to get exposure, but there were also a large group of banks that had no interest in flying down, and you had to kind of make your way up. I actually took part in the interviews that happened on campus at one of the New York banks that did target the school. So, and
you made it in that way. So out of those 30 people, I'm curious, with this program, was it 100% placement or 80, or what would you say into banking?
It was like 98.
Wow.
With like 80% into IB jobs. The other 20% maybe went into like an asset management role, or every now and then there would be someone who went into kind of an interesting finance kind of corp dev, like someone did the business development department at SX, which I thought was pretty cool. And so
how hard is it to get in there? I mean, assume given everyone's picking from there, it's probably super competitive. Is it a GPA cutoff thing? You have to interview for it. How do you even get into that program?
It was all those. So it was less about how good of a candidate you were and how early on you heard about it, I would say. So you had to have like a, I don't know, 3.7 GPA, which for whoever's listening that comes from a big state school, your first 2 years are often not too challenging. It's a lot of intro classes, and a decent GPA is very doable. And it's about hearing about the program, and then you apply and you give kind of your involvement, et cetera. And then they make you take the GMAT as a sophomore in college.
Oh, wow.
To test your aptitude. And I think the cutoff score was like surprisingly high. Like I want to say it was like 700.
Wow. Okay.
Was kind of like, if you break that, then you're in. And so kind of all those factors, and then they displayed interest in finance and a kind of route of what you wanted to take that you could display to the what I'll describe as the gatekeepers at that school allowed you to join into that program.
Fair. And the gatekeepers, are they like professors, or are they just other students who are like?
It was 2 professors and then 1 administrative person who actually had a ton of say, even though they lacked finance experience, but did a very good job of vetting what I would describe as motivated individuals.
Great. Okay, so you're kind of doing the networking thing. You end up kind of in this interview cycle, dropping your resume. You're in this program. Before the banks come on, do you get interviews across all 4 because you have pretty strong resume and coming from this program?
Yeah. So the one thing about the program that I think is interesting is you basically have to say, here are the 2 banks I want to interview at.
Okay.
Out of the maybe 8 that come to campus or 6 that come to campus.
Some game theory going on, huh? Game theory.
Sorry, say it again.
Some game theory going on there, I'm sure. Because do you choose the top 2 or do you choose the ones that are highly ranked? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's absolutely that, but it's game theory on the bank's part too, because that administrative person that I was talking about before will basically tell the banks, here's who wants to come here. So if they do good, they will accept, and we have to almost agree we will accept. So that helps the banks get comfortable with extending offers and keeping a very high acceptance rate.
Right.
And it keeps the administration comfortable because they know they'll have a high placement rate. So it's a bit of like the administration / professors gaming the system, but all in all, it's utilitarian. I'm sure some kids kind of get the short end of the stick, and some kids benefit greatly, but all in all, I think it benefits kind of everyone because it keeps a pipeline of alumni going into these banks, and it keeps the banks happy with their acceptance rates.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating. I've heard about these types of programs at all these like larger state schools. It's people are like, oh, that's a lot of placement. When you think of how large the student population, how many finance majors are, it's actually pretty small, right? So it's important early on, like if you are going to a state school or non-target large school, to look out for any of these groups or these clubs and figure out what you need to do to get yourself aligned really quickly.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's all about, the school I went to had, 35,000 undergrads. Yeah. And, business is, at a lot of these state schools, is one of the most popular majors. And although, the finance major is the most natural kind of tangent into banking, there are also accounting majors or economics majors. So when you go to try to get placed, you are probably going to compete against, 500 to 1,000 kids, where if you come from a, smaller liberal arts school, there's 1,000 kids, that's half the school. Yeah. And so, there are opportunities to differentiate, but keep in mind these banks aren't going to fill half of their analyst class with the same school, especially not a state school in a lot of cases, and, take that for what you will. Yeah. So differentiation is key early on.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Good to hear. Yeah. I mean, I went to a small liberal arts college, and I can say you can almost call it a semi-target, because just if you want to get on the street for how small the school is, it actually has a pretty good presence. It's at Williams. But anyways,
right.
So
I was going to say the NESCAC school is a good example, but
it's a great example.
I'm familiar with them to some extent.
Cool. So you're kind of, so you land this job at what you call the kind of middle tier bulge bracket bank, and you're kind of going into the summer. What are your thoughts? How was it? Was it, long working? Did you have to work, 80 plus hour weeks? Was it something where it was more just collegial fun? What was that first summer like?
Yeah, I think, if you're trying to get a full-time offer, the hours are going to be long, but you're going up there to get it's a 10-week interview. I'm like saying a thing that I feel like everyone hears over and over again, but it really is true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're really on the desk for probably 8 to 9 weeks, depending on how long your training cycle is.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an interview starting the moment you get there. And desk time matters, not just because of like, oh, I'm the hardest working, but people want to see that you're engaged. And so if you're asking for other forms of work, or you're just engaged with the group, like maybe you just want to talk to your peers or the associates or the analysts or whatever, that goes a long way. So when people say like, were the hours long, it was like, yeah, they were really long. But it wasn't unbearable at all. It was, in fact, like I made really good relationships with a lot of my, summer analyst class that I still connect with today. So
that's cool.
It's just a breeding ground for motivated people your age, and like take advantage of that, because that may be a big part of your social network in the city going forward.
No, yeah, for sure. And did you feel like was the offer rate pretty solid from this summer? Was it like a 70% higher, 80%, or would you say lower?
Yeah, I think the bank targets 80%, and I think it was about that
80%.
Summer. And I think that, so after I started, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I got really familiar with how the hiring process worked. And I think they always targeted 80%, and they almost always hit it.
Okay.
With some, standard deviation of plus or minus 10%, but that's only,
that's pretty high that's pretty high from what I've
60-person class.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
It was high.
That's pretty high, which is 4 out of 5. Basically, kids get the offer. Did you feel like you were at risk ever during the summer that you had messed up, or did you feel like you were getting good feedback and you were kind of you felt like you had enough of like the networking skills and outgoing where you were in a good spot?
No, I felt like I was in a good spot early on.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, that program prepares you. Like you take modeling classes, and
mm-hmm.
They bring in all kinds of people to get you familiar with what you're going to do. Like I knew how to spread comps coming in. I knew how to do.
You're probably more prepped than the world kids.
LBO model, that kind of thing, where a NESCAT counterpart may not exactly know how to do that.
Clueless, yeah, totally clueless.
So,
I didn't even have a banking summer internship, so you can imagine what happened to me when I first started.
Right.
So you survive the long summer. You make some good connections, and it sounds like you enjoyed it. And tell me a little bit, like, any funny stories? Were you able to enjoy the summer at all? Go out?
Oh, absolutely. We did. I mean, name an intern bar, right? Like Thebes or whatever, beer garden, like you name it, like we did it. Golfed a lot on like Sunday when we could.
Mm-hmm.
Lived in an apartment with a bunch of guys, and we all crammed in there. All the school I went to's guys,
mm-hmm.
Who then we lived together in our first and second year out of college.
Nice.
So it was great. And they actually all went to different banks. And now I think all of them except one work at different private equity firms. So it's been a highly valuable network to keep through the years. And I mean, they're not just friends, but they're great professional networks too. So
yeah, I think that's important, is like, yeah, you guys all started out, but now it's the same thing with me. Like the people that start off as analysts, I mean, I'm older than you, but it's incredible. Like one's running his own hedge fund, the other one's at like the top of this like PE, all these incredible funds. And I'm like, wow. It's just unbelievable what people are doing. But so you're kind of, let's go back to when you kind of started full. So you go into senior year, you're like super happy, I'm sure, and have a blast your senior year, and you basically are, you're kind of going to be coming in and working pretty hard. Did you do anything to prepare? Did you do anything to kind of leading into the first year, besides getting figuring out who you're going to live with and finding an apartment?
Yeah, this is not a plug for however many people are listening. No one told me to say this, but I did do like the Wall Street Oasis, like I think it was just like an LBO modeling course, and it's funny, at the time I didn't like judge it based on value. I just judged it based on it was the cheapest, and it was pretty helpful. And
good to know.
it was just good to have as like a quick refresher coming into the summer. after, not taking a year off. That's the wrong way to think about senior year, but definitely not pushing quite as hard as I had the previous couple of years through interviews and making sure your GPA was high and all that. So did some, preparation, kept somewhat abreast in the market, asked the group that I was going back into for things like equity research reports, reading materials, that kind of stuff, leverage primers to get familiar with terms, things like that. Those things go a long way. It shows your group that you're interested, you're engaged, and you want to hit the ground running when you get there. So, even if you just ask for those and you kind of skim them, that goes a long way. And I can speak to that from being on the analyst / junior associate side. When a summer intern would ask for that in advance, I'd be like, I like that. And that says a lot. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's almost like you're just showing that you're not going to just kind of slide in and hope things work out. You're putting in a little bit of legwork early on. Well, hopefully hopefully you get to travel a little bit or do something right after graduation before you started. But were you kind of going into banking thinking, okay, I know private equity recruiting is going to start super early since, it had been moving up at this point, it had been moving up every year, or had you heard rumblings of private equity kind of prior to your analyst stint, or what were the thoughts going in there?
Yeah, I didn't know if I wanted to. There was always some thought when I first started in banking that I wanted to go back to Florida. And so I didn't know exactly what I want to do. I just kind of thought, okay, I'll do a couple years in New York, have a good time, save some money, and then go back to Florida and get a Labrador and, go fishing. And
did you have debt coming out of school?
Yeah, right. So, that isn't how it worked out. And after my,
no, I was asking if you had any debt coming out of school. Is that why you were like, I'm going to need to save money? Or you're just more like, hey, I'm going to save and then just go back and live a more relaxed life?
I actually had no debt.
Okay, good.
Big bonus of state school is if you
it's cheaper.
Plan accordingly. And, I didn't have any debt, which was nice. I just meant, you get not overpaid, but you get paid handsomely as an analyst. And, if you live between your means in some way, shape, or form, you will save some money at the end of the year. And, based on your bank's performance. And, I came out of school in 2015, which was a really good time to go into banking. Market was hot. Lots of deals were getting done. And so for 3 years, I pretty much came out into a bull market.
Yeah.
And
can you tell me what the pay ranges were? The pay ranges? Like, were you?
Say it again.
Can you tell me the pay ranges? So was it like 85 base coming out or 80 base? And then,
I can tell.
Yeah,
I can tell you for sure. The first year was 85, and then my bonus was 70 as a first year, so it was like 155 all in.
That's
and at
really
that
strong.
bank, 70 was kind of top 10%. I don't know if I got the highest. I think maybe one or two kids got higher. Second year was 90. And then the bonus my second year was 115, which was like a good bonus.
That's
for a
crazy,
second year.
Man. That's really solid.
According to kind of my street comp.
Your second year out of school, you're making over $200,000.
Yeah, exactly. And learning a lot, and taking on a lot of responsibility, and then was early promoted my third year to associate, so got a nice. Like sign-on bonus, which was something
25,
like
25?
$40,000.
Yep.
And then you start at 120 base, and then I had one bonus as an associate, and it was 150. So that year was a really nice year for me.
Yeah, so I can see why you, especially with living with a bunch of other roommates, I could see how you could save some money with those. That was significantly higher than when I was in banking. I've seen those numbers, but those bonus numbers are really solid. Your bank was probably crushing it those 3 years.
The bank was having record years. Our group was having adequate years, and I was
the top performer.
Committed. I was performing well. Yeah, I was near the top kind of 10% of my class. every year, and was really engaged. Sat on like an internal board at the bank, which helped with making analysts and associates' lives better, and basically was placed on that board by being engaged, being outgoing, and performing well.
Yeah.
And so,
what do you think? Why do you
I
think?
helped with recruiting.
Why do you think?
Go ahead.
Just why do you think you were able to perform so well? Because there's a lot of go-getters that come into banking that are like not afraid of the long hours. But why do you think? Do you think it was that program that prepped you so well with the internships, or do you feel like it's just a personality trait that you developed over time with practice? What sets you apart? Because there's a lot of really smart kids, even personable kids, that go into this industry.
Yeah, I think if you ask like an MD or a VP or whatever in banking, like what makes a great analyst better than a good analyst, or something along those lines, they'll say proactivity. So like looking to do the next step. Don't just be a computer. Like, good analysts can be a computer. You give them work, they churn out work, whatever, their numbers are right. Great analysts do the work and then say, this is the analysis we need to do, or, here's why I actually disagree with that. My MD always told me that my best trait was I bordered the line of insubordination. And he loved that.
Yeah.
And, that I think that's where I kind of tiptoed, and I was never kind of afraid to say what I meant, but you have to do it in a very respectful way. What I would tell kids when I was a senior analyst, second year analyst, is what goes the farthest to me is a positive attitude. Like you can be the best analyst in the world, but if I hate to come to your desk and ask you for help on something, or if someone hates to ask you to stay a little bit later because they're worried about your reaction, your bonus is going to be lower regardless of work product. And if your work product is in the 70th percentile, but people do not mind asking you for help or want to engage with you on projects, you're going to be top bucket, even though your work product may not reflect that. So a positive attitude and engagement go a really long way, not just in your internship, but kind of forever from my 4 years of experience. So take it with a grain of salt. But.
Fair. Okay, so you kind of get the early promotion to associate. Was that something that had been in place for several years, or was it kind of a new thing when you got it?
It's funny, self-fulfilling prophecy. So that internal board I sat on, I pushed for it. And then when it got improved, and well, here's the thing, and a lot of people may know this. So Goldman did that. They, and I wasn't at Goldman, but Goldman Sachs a couple years ago, or when I was in banking, so maybe 3 years ago, so call it 2016, 2017-ish, implemented the 2 years as an analyst, then an early associate promote, in an attempt to keep more kids from going straight to private equity, to incentivize them to stay and show that the bank is investing in them, et cetera. And when Goldman does something, you'll notice that the street will often follow. Not, whether it's Goldman is better is a weird word, but it's more just like they tend to set trends at some kind of organizational culture level that other banks tend to kind of follow suit to stay competitive. And so it was a mix of Goldman doing it and then us pushing for it internally. And when that happened, it was like the natural thing would be the guy who pushed to implement it would get the reward.
I think it's hilarious that you're like, yes, you should absolutely get the early promote. And yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, yeah, you can promote me now. So you get that promotion and you take it. Was at this stage, once you took that promotion, were you like, wait a second here, do I want to be a banker the rest of my life? Is there what else is going on? When did you kind of pick your head up and say, maybe I should start recruiting for PE?
What happened was when I got the early promote, I actually wasn't thinking about leaving, but as an associate, and I think there's a lot of people who are really cut out for banking, and I think banking is a great profession. And some analysts who leave banking have this really bad taste in their mouth, whether they had like a bad boss or they had a bad experience or whatever. I had a good taste in my mouth at that time, and I left with a good one. And so I'm adamant that it's a good profession. I had felt that my learning curve had flattened, and I realized that when I got a promotion, and I wasn't doing anything differently than I was doing the year before. And so as a second-year analyst, I was often staffed with a first-year analyst under me as kind of like support, and I traveled to meetings and did all the good things of banking, right? Got put on good projects, etc.
Yeah.
And as an associate, I got a slightly better desk and got knocked out of the bullpen, but nothing really changed. And then I was comparing my experience as an early promote associate to my, friends, roommates, colleagues' experiences at whatever buy-side role they were taking part in. And the conversations I was having with them was they're learning a lot. They're being put under different situations and getting out of their comfort zone. And I felt like I wasn't. And so although the bank was supporting me and I had a positive experience, I realized that, to continue developing my professional toolkit, if you will, I needed to make a move.
So I feel like I feel like this is common though. Like the banks have had this attrition problem for forever, really. It's just getting worse and worse every year, where I think it's gone something from like in the 1990s, it was something like 2.5 years was the average tenure. I think now it's something like under a year or like a little over a year or something,
right,
for an analyst. And so do you feel like this program has helped or just helped on the market? Like the analyst, I'm talking about the analyst to associate early promote. Has it helped, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the statistics would show. So I know that my year, the other early promote left a year, like 6 months after me.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say my year it didn't, but I know the year after they maybe. And just for reference, this early associate promote was kind of like 4 people every year out of remaining analyst class. Because remember, this is the end of your second year, so you've had some attrition after your first year.
Yep.
And so maybe out of the 70-person analyst class that came in as a first year, maybe there was 40 left in the second year.
Mm-hmm.
And then they gave 4 offers.
Right.
So 10% of the class at that time got an offer to kind of.
But how many of those people actually take it? How many actually take it? Almost everyone takes it, but then a lot of them still jump, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people take it. 1, there's a sign-on bonus. 2, it helps with marketing yourself if you do want to leave.
Yep.
And some people may argue that that's ethically wrong to just take the promotion that someone else may have gotten and then leverage it for a position elsewhere. But at the end of the day, like, that's kind of this industry at the end of the, people move around a lot, kind of at every level, not just banking. You'll notice that if you go look up a senior guy at private equity firm X, they're going to have experience from 8 or 9 places at this point, or 6. Often.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that's understandable, but like it just surprises me that there wouldn't be some sort of like clawback on that signing. So like they would give that offer as you're coming up into your second year for example, like during your bonus.
There is, just to answer your question.
Okay. Yep. So you have to give it back if you leave before you do a year or something like that?
I think when the first year it was a 12 month. If you finished 12 months, there was no clawback. Now I think they've done 24 months.
Ooh.
And I think it's prorated. So if you stay for 6 months, you only pay back 75%.
Got it.
If that makes sense. But it's interesting, right? Like they found that even banking compensation, which is higher than most private equity, and then they can give you cash up front in this bonus and all these things. Like kids aren't staying for pay; like they're actually going for the experience. And the learning curve is kind of most important. So I've seen other banks take part in things like they'll transfer you groups, so you kind of learn a new industry.
Yeah,
I've heard of that. All kinds of stuff.
They need to get do you think they need to get like ping pong tables and beer and kegs in the in the bullpens?
I don't. That would be so bad. But
no liability there. Don't worry about it. The interns drinking with the analysts.
Yeah, right. 20-year-old.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's just tough for that. It's I don't know what they're gonna do. Honestly, I think they just have to keep broadening.
Well, they're already competing with tech. So like, I don't know, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you would argue that the smartest people go into investment banking. Maybe you'd argue that. That's how some people would describe it. Certainly bankers would describe that.
Yeah.
now you would argue that the smartest people are probably going to Google or going to wherever, right? Like name tech firm X. And so they're competing for smart talent at a college, not just for different industries, but they're competing within finance as well, because private equity, there's more private equity firms offering analyst classes for one, and there's more they're offering really early offers to basically bet that the bank gives them a good training and good experience for 2 years, and then they get to poach them and reap the rewards. So.
Yeah, the private equity analyst programs, I know KKR recently started one up. Have you seen that be a trend recently where more and more, I know the recruiting has gotten ridiculously early, where it's now right when the analysts hit the desk, they get recruited for private equity right after coming out of training.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Well, I know that cycle recruiting kicked off, and to not age this podcast, it's 2019. So cycle recruiting kicked off in like late September or October-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it was like beginning of October, middle of October for the most part is when cycle recruiting kicked off, which means after training, you've been on the desk 2 months. But that's not what, private equity, it's funny when people are like, oh, they don't have any experience. Like, that's not what private equity is betting on. They're betting on a smart enough kid and then they're betting on the bank to give them a good experience. Right. So like that's the whole business model is,
so why not?
We're going to bet you for intelligence and motivation, but make sure that you're in a good group at a good bank that we know will give you quality experience. So it makes perfect sense for me if I was a, owner of a private equity firm, why would I hire except from a place where a kid's going to have 2 years experience when I hire him? That being said,
mm-hmm.
I just read Schwartzman's book. I just finished it. And they hire a third of their juniors fresh out of college. They have an analyst program. So there's an argument to be had both ways.
I was going to say, why don't the funds just go all the way back when people get summer analyst offers, or or they get the full-time offers after their junior year?
Well, banking's adjusted as well, right? Like banking,
they're going sophomore. Yeah,
right. Exactly. There's more sophomore programs, right?
Yep.
So they're not just recruiting you for your junior internship now. They're trying to get you as a sophomore and then to come back. I think that's backfired a little bit because, I don't know, sophomores will often leverage that offer to try to go somewhere better as a junior, and then that junior offer they'll try to leverage somewhere better. It's bizarre. It's like just leverage the offer, but
like any good banker would. Come on. And so, anyways,
exactly.
The funny part, I've heard. I think BAML and a few other places are now giving 2-year offers. So if they give you a sophomore summer offer, they'll give you a sophomore and junior summer offer, and you have to accept for both years. Which is kind of silly because it's like, okay, the person could just renege or trade up, but after their first sophomore. But anyways, let's go back a little bit to your, we'll wrap up soon, but let's go back a little real quick to your decision and your timing. So you did another almost full year as an junior associate after this quick promo.
Yep.
And then when did you start kind of looking for PE? How did you just start talking to the traditional recruiters and getting on cycle? How did that work?
Yeah, exactly. Halfway through, a little bit before halfway through that third year,
mm-hmm.
I started, for the first time, throwing my hat in the ring to the general placement firm world, of which I had a lot of good connectivity with because of these colleagues and roommates and friends that I had connected with. So I'd always ask for reference,
mm-hmm.
Which I think is good if you can do that. So, friend X who got placed at, PE firm Y, who has a really good relationship with, let's say, I don't know, Odyssey or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He would introduce me via email. I can vouch, whatever. And it's a lot more receptive, and often a lot better, especially if you're from a typically non-target, school, as you try to jump into private equity, which is,
a lot of the recruiters are lazy.
That's the truth, though, right? Like,
they don't want to put the non-target kid.
They pedigree labeled and all that.
So okay, so you basically you put your hat in the ring and you get some kind of warm intros, and was that was enough to get you kind of into the cycle? And were the interviews tough? Were they technical? It looks like you kind of came in almost as like, not the typical associate role. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I was looking for immediate at the end of my third year. So I basically would have had one more year of experience than the typical associate joining. And as a result, not just of my, 2-year delayed recruiting cycle, but my experience and my deal kind of experience on my resume as well. My interviews were probably a little bit more technical in nature to make sure that everything checked out, which was totally fine. And I would say if the typical private equity associate interview was 50% behavioral and 50% technical, and then of course your like LBO model test and all that. Mine was probably, the first interview was probably 80% technical, just like deal walkthroughs and knowing every kind of meaningful line in each deal. So like being able to walk down the free cash flow for kind of every deal. And if it was a sponsor sell side, for instance, they would want to know the sponsor's thesis and what they identified as risks, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Would you have done the deal? Why or why not? Blah, blah, blah. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So, was prepared for all that and got a lot of good looks, and decided to go with kind of a well-known family office in their private equity arm.
What was the pay? Was it a paid cut? Because you were getting paid pretty well by the time you left.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't a pay cut on the base. It was a slight bump on the base. And then the bonus was, it was probably about the same when it was all said and done.
It's around 300 all in, or a little over 300.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Not bad. You're still only a few years out of school,
fair,
remember.
It was a big family office. So
yeah, and so you're kind of making the jump there. Did you have other offers from other funds, or did you, as soon as you got this, you just grabbed it because it was kind of
I was nearing getting an offer from kind of two other what I'll describe as more typical PE firms. Got this offer from this family office, had very limited time to answer. On purpose. And that's what a lot of these firms will do. And they force you to pull the trigger or not. And I decided to.
Do you regret that, or do you feel like it worked out for you?
No. I don't regret it all. So I had thought that, and this may be informative for some people. If there's one thing that's informative here that maybe I can add value to, it's this. And most people think of family office as it's going to be better from a lifestyle perspective, which may actually be true. Like I didn't have, I wasn't getting churned or anything like that. Or that it's like, so I've actually heard some of my friends say it's like a really good seat. Like you want to be in a family office. And I don't disagree with that. If you're at a really senior level, or you like the slower atmosphere versus a typical kind of, middle market-esque private or, large private equity fund or something like that.
Right.
The downside to a family office, in my opinion, is that one, they're typically going to look at a lot less stuff. They're going to have a really solid thesis, and we were investing on the behalf of very few families, so they were hyper involved and would basically give a gladiator-esque thumbs down on a lot of stuff.
You're vetoing everything.
Yeah, exactly. And as a junior, you want to get as many reps in as possible because you want to learn as much as possible. Whether you want to dig in on one industry and just know it cold, so you want to look at 10 deals a month or something like that, great. Or maybe you want to look at a ton of different industries, so you have some kind of inch-deep experience in everything and different valuation methods and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The downside of a family office is you don't really get that. Very quickly, things are nixed. And at the end of the day, it's the family making the decision, not your work. And I felt like it kind of marginalized my value add. And that's why I ended up leaving.
Got it. So
on good terms, by the way, because I expressed that concern very early on.
And you're like, that was my concern, and it's now realized. So peace. Peace out.
Yeah. Well, family offices are going to invest in secrecy. There are family offices that I actually interviewed another one that I had no idea existed, and they were investing something like a $4 billion book in direct private equity with control. And I was like, I have never even heard of this. Yeah, and I had a pretty good, finger on the pulse of the sponsor market, and had never even come across the name. And then when I joined this firm, they're never going to give you a full picture on how they invest. It's just in the nature of those family offices. So it was hard to figure out in interviews. And then when I joined, recognized there's a lot of smart people and there was really good infrastructure, but not what I was going for. I was going to steepen my learning curve, not kind of sit back and rest on my laurels.
Fair. So you felt like there was a little bit too much control at the top, which makes sense. Family office, they're just, you're not getting the reps that you wanted. You still felt you felt semi-junior or mid-level, and you wanted those reps. And so you started kind of putting your hat back in the ring. You talk to recruiters again. You go back to the alumni base. How did you kind of make this next jump?
Yeah, so I went through all the previous recruiters I had talked to, a year or so before, through the process, except for the one that placed me. Very key, given that it would be a conflict of interest. But did kind of the same thing, and I had a very easy story to tell, which was, why are you leaving after 1 year? Well, here's why. And had a lot of good reception from, again, the typical sponsor universe, and got an offer that I really liked, and joined, I guess 6 months ago, and have really enjoyed it. And it's exactly what I want. I joined a generalist kind of middle market fund, with the idea of, I want to learn, look at as many deals as possible, look at a lot of different industries, be able to flex capital up or down. So maybe take part in smaller deals that need, some kind of operating expertise or repair, if you will, or invest in professionalized businesses and really learn about the best way to put on a capital structure. And we've done that, and I really have learned a lot. So it's exactly what I wanted to sign up for.
That's awesome, man. Sounds like you got to the place you want to get to. So congrats on that. That's not easy.
Yeah.
Especially coming from a large state school. You defied all the odds. We're kind of top of your class all the way through, so that's awesome. I couldn't have lasted that. I can't believe you did another year at your Bulge bracket, but it sounds like you were in a great group, and it sounds like you were involved. And the bank was actually pretty cognizant of the fact that they were trying to make things a little bit more palatable for the younger folk by that point.
Yeah.
So I guess before we wrap it up, anything you'd kind of tell your younger self, or any advice for the younger listeners out there, and kind of the ones in undergrad or kind of the first few years out?
All the stuff about, always ask to grab coffee or all that, I agree with all of it. So I don't need to harp on that. I would say keep a positive attitude no matter what. And if you can't, then you shouldn't be in whatever seat you're in. Like, if you really can't, it's, impacting your life in a way that, is negative, then don't continue. And then I think the last thing is, and I mean this not in the literal sense, but always be recruiting. I tell every kid that, ABR. And I don't mean always be going and trying to find another job, but always be ready. Because you never know when your dream sponsor or dream bank has a position open up and they need someone in 8 days. And, oh, wait, I haven't refreshed on my, 3-statement modeling, or I haven't.
I don't know my deals. Yeah, I don't know my deals cold. Yeah, no, it's great advice. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Florida man.
That's my advice.
Thank you thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.